with you. Hopefully, you've had a chance to review all the materials that we've provided. We're looking forward to a long conversation with you, and we'll outline how that's going to play out over time. Just a note, we are recording this meeting, so we want to make sure that, from a note-taking standpoint, that all our input is gathered. This is an important conversation we want to have first with the subcommittee. Then, further conversations we'll talk about in just a minute, but we want to make sure we capture everyone's thoughts as we go through this. So let's get into it with the next slide. So today, um, we're gonna um, we're gonna review a portion of the recommendations, the recommendations on some of the existing programs. And before we do that, we'll do a very breezy review of how we got here. All of the background materials, which we takes us into last year, so we want to make sure we review that with you, um, just so we setting the context of where these recommendations come from and tying those strings together of the data analysis that happened in phase one, the community conversations and the conversations with the committee in phase two, which brings us to now these program recommendations. And then we'll have a special sort of place for new ideas. As we discuss these recommendations, there may be some new ideas. And so we're going to set up a parking lot for new ideas. And I'll explain a little bit more on the next slide. So, or 2 slides from now. So looking at the schedule, and I wanted to get this across to you now. Um, so taking a step back from the recommendations themselves, Caitlin did send out communication earlier that we have a unique opportunity to apply for some federal funds to support the recommendations that we have, or the recommendation that we will have. So we're going to do two things at once. We're going to split our brains a bit. So looking at the schedule, we're having this meeting with you today. We've actually scheduled 2 meetings, and we want to make sure that we have adequate time to talk through all the recommendations and new ideas or what have you. And then in reference to the HUD Pro Housing Grant, we will be releasing some information on that, a draft of our application to HUD. We're required to release that, make it public. There's a public comment period, which will begin this week. And then we'll have a public hearing on the application itself. And once you get to see that, you'll see how that relates back to the recommendations we have in the document that we're going to be discussing with you today. We will have a second subcommittee meeting on October 8th. And so we'll have more time with you to talk about these recommendations. And at that time, we'll talk about the HUD program. And then we'll go to the Housing Commission with an info item. So it'll be an opportunity for the Housing Commission as a whole to talk about the recommendations and so forth. And then we will, we're seeing the parking lot. And then we'll have additional community engagement throughout the remainder of the year. Talk with Karen before this meeting, and we expressed to her and want to reinforce with all of you. We're going to have a long conversation about this, the recommendations themselves. We will have a short conversation about the application because the HUD program application is due October 15th. That's the deadline HUD has set with us. So we're scrambling to get that done. But want to make sure everyone understands that there's two conversations going on. One about the recommendations themselves and making sure we're clear about what they are and how that's going to guide us going forward. And then a short conversation about this application for some funding that we may get, and we may use that to implement some of these recommendations in the future. So just want to reinforce that we're going to have we have an opportunity for a long conversation about the recommendations themselves. So hopefully we can end this by the end of the year, but we can certainly see how that goes as we get into the conversation. Last slide, for me at least. So today we're going to talk about recommendations pertaining to some of the existing programs. Hopefully with our upcoming meeting, we'll talk about the recommendations for new programs, ideas for those. And in each meeting, we will have a parking lot. So as we go through this and people have new ideas or issues to explore, we want to make sure that we're going to, in this meeting today, talk about the existing programs and get through those recommendations. Don't want to discard anyone's ideas about new programs or different things. So we're going to just create a parking lot that we can circle back to at the end. Our chief concern is getting through the recommendations, making sure there's understanding about those, that we can, see where agreement lies with those. And so we can always, circle back at the end of the conversation to deal with parking lot issues. So want two things from everyone today, because we do want to get everyone's input. All input is valid. We want to receive that. So two things. One is please be, brief. Brevity is great. Start with the punchline. Like, I think this program is great, but here's a new idea, or something to that effect, so we can really get to it. And then when we come back to the parking lot, we can have a more fulsome conversation about why this, why that, what more do we want to say about this, what have you, so that we're achieving our main goal today, which is to discuss the recommendations themselves and make sure everyone gets a chance to see those and react to those. And again, we'll come back to the parking lot towards the end of the meeting to make sure we're having some understanding about new ideas or questions that may be a little bit off point, or whatever the case may be. So those are the kind of the ground rules today. Hopefully, we want to get through the first part, which is the review of the background information very quickly, and then really get into those recommendations and get to hear from you on those. So with that, I want to turn it back over to Caitlin so we can get into it. Oh, last thing, sorry, Caitlin. I just want to give a special shout out to Nicole Toulouse, who's with us today, even though she's got more important things going on right now. So thanks, Nicole, for joining us. I wonder if you've had time to read stuff, but thanks again for being here.
Yes, agreed. When I got Nicole's out of office message, I was like, I did not know that she was having a baby, but congratulations. It's the best job in the world. And we are grateful that you are choosing to spend your time with us this morning. But although I'm sure you've been up for hours already.
I've been up. This is way more fun than diapers.
Yeah. All right. So yeah, I did want to just give a quick reminder about how we got to where we are. And because I think it has, as Richard said, been a while since we last checked in. So we figured it would probably make sense to just kind of give that quick overview. And actually, Nicole, I just saw your chat in your comment in the chat, and the question was, should we provide brief feedback as each recommendation is presented? And yes, the answer is we're going to be, when we get to the recommendations, we're going to be going through each recommendation first, kind of giving an overview, talking about how we're sort of envisioning today the changes to existing programs, and then we'll pause after each recommendation for a brief discussion. So we started the homeownership study back in 2022, and it came about to respond to a directive from the Affordable Housing Master Plan Implementation Framework, which was updated in 2021, and to really just respond to community conversations around affordable homeownership. The main goal of the study has been to develop recommendations for modifying our existing programs, and to consider the addition of new programs that help to clarify the community's vision and goals for homeownership, create better homeownership outcomes for persons of color and other underserved population, and increase the available resources for existing homeowners. So to achieve this goal, we've focused the study on a few key objectives, which include assessing market trends and barriers to homeownership, examining the county's existing programs with an equity lens. We also sought to more clearly define the county's values and goals as it relates to homeownership, and also assess where there are additional opportunities for potential homebuyer and existing homeowners where the local government can intervene. So, as I mentioned before, we began in 2022. We've proceeded through the 3 phases of the study, and we're now in phase 3. where we have used the data and the feedback that was received during these earlier phases of the study to develop recommendations for modifying our existing programs, as well as a few additional new programs. So over the next few slides, we're going to quickly summarize some of the key findings from earlier phases of the study, and then we're going to get into the actual recommendations, and I'm going to turn it over to Akiria, who's going to start that part.
Thanks so much, Caitlin. Good morning, everyone. So as previously mentioned, the homeownership study kicked off in July of 2022, and we began by developing a scope and a process of the study, but also through data and research where we looked at barriers for purchasing, we looked at development trends, homeownership rates, economic and demographic characteristics of owners, and more. And we also researched the participation and history of our existing homeownership assistance programs. So last October, we released the homeownership barriers analysis where we reported on trends related to the homeownership market, such as homeownership rates, cost burden rates for homeowners, as well as mortgage and financing trends. So this research validated our long-held understanding that racial minorities and other underrepresented populations often fare differently in the homeownership market than their white counterparts. So in terms of key findings, certainly, we know that residential development is mostly producing mid to high end apartments, and there's very little ownership products being produced. While the number of homeowners in Arlington County has increased, the homeownership rate has declined, indicating an overall lack of supply in the market. Next slide. So this chart indicates how affordable typologies are generally limited to condos. There are seldom occurrences of townhomes and single-family detached homes below the $500,000 price point. So during this period of time that we were studying, about 99% of all homes were priced at or below $500,000. They were condo units. Other forms of housing priced below $500,000 were quickly disappearing and continue to do that. Condos made up more than half of all residential sales in 2021, and that trend continued into 2022. So we also see that there's room for growth in terms of who can be served. We see that racial minorities have the lowest ownership rates as reflected here. Their white household counterparts have the highest ownership rates and also account for the largest share of homeowners. The ownership rate for Black and African American households is about 21%, 29% for Hispanic or Latino households, and 35% for Asian households. Furthermore, we find that mortgage denial rates and mortgage interest rates are higher for Hispanic or Latino households and Black households who are charged higher mortgage interest rates than their white counterparts. We also see disparities in rate spread. Rate spread shows how much one group is paying in interest compared to the standard benchmark, which can highlight disparities and does so in this case. We also see that there is a considerable rental population that currently live in the county but have incomes that can support homeownership. Notably, about half of all renter households in Arlington County have incomes that could sustain homeownership, and that's incomes over $100,000 annually. This suggests that there's a segment of the population that could benefit from expanded county support. In addition, about 20% of all mortgages originated in 2021 were to households with incomes below $100,000, which means that the lending community is also currently serving households that are in this income range. Conversely, significant, we see that about 20% of all mortgages originated in 2021 were to households with incomes below $100,000. And so we do know that there is a contingent of households that are able to support home ownership and probably have less debt than other households in that income range. However, in contrast with those households, over 2/3 of homeowners who earn less than 80% of the area median income are housing cost burdened, meaning they are expending more than 30% of their gross monthly income toward their housing costs. Additionally, other populations such as racial and ethnic minorities, older adults, and persons with disabilities are disproportionately burdened. Housing cost burden, again, is defined as households paying more than 30% of their annual income towards housing goals, towards housing costs. And in aggregate, Black households earn less than half of the median income of white households. So next we took a look at the county's existing homeownership programs. We analyzed programs that were operated directly by the county, as well as those that are provided by third-party or nonprofit partners. As a point of reference, at the time of this analysis, a household of 4 earning 80% of the area median income earned $113,000. So through our analysis of these programs, we gained insights that were our building blocks essentially for community engagement, as well as the development of our vision and goals. So in terms of MyPAP, we see that single purchasers are willing to purchase smaller units. We have an increase in single purchasers across the time span that we've been researching the programs. Additionally, there's an increase of single white purchasers in their mid-30s, many of which are living with parents or have multiple roommates until they purchase, and are early enough in their careers and to enable them to meet income criteria. Also, those households tend to have considerably less debt. We also see that purchasers with larger household size are limited by the presence of average household debt. So a car note, student loans, credit cards, having one or more of these debts is often a determining factor in whether or not a household can afford to purchase a unit to accommodate a growing family. So in terms of our affordable dwelling units, as previously stated in other presentations, we have about 59 homes in our ADU portfolio. 72% of those units were added between the years of 2005 and 2017. All of the units that were added to the portfolio after 2017 are condos. We also see that there is minimal turnover of affordable dwelling units. Buyers tend to stay put once they purchase those units. So in terms of Spark, which is the program that we partner with Virginia Housing on that provides a 1% interest rate reduction, we see that Spark is really essential in helping MyPAP borrowers because it greatly benefits them by increasing the depth of affordability. But the program also allows us to serve buyers that have considerably higher income, so we can go up to about 140% of AMI. The average monthly savings for Spark is about $250 to $300 a month. However, as seen with MyPAP borrowers, Spark borrowers are predominantly one-person households. Our Rebuilding Together program, we see that is a vital program, substantially needed in the county, but the program is limited by the amount of funding and the volunteers that are available with the right skill sets. So because of this, the program has to prioritize seniors, people living with disabilities, families with children, and veterans. Our homebuyer education takeaways. for that home buyer education is really valuable. It provides that valuable knowledge, but the decision to purchase is driven by individual circumstances rather than the timing of when education is received. So many factors influence when someone buys a home, and the timing of purchase may not be within a year or two even of the time that homebuyer education is taken. And so factors, of course, include market conditions, financial, personal readiness, availability of desired properties, and the list can go on. A quick takeaway for our real estate tax relief program is that we see that program is vital in enabling eligible homeowners to remain in their homes as the rising property tax values and drive up the housing costs. And so we do see that program is vital in helping those households to maintain sustainable housing. So now Caitlin will provide a recap of our community engagement work.
Thanks, Kyria. So as we moved into phase 2, this is where the majority of our community engagement occurred during the study. If you need a refresher of sort of what we learned, I would highly encourage you to revisit the phase 2 report, which kind of details the feedback that we received during this engagement. But I'm just going to kind of give a quick overview of some of the activities that we held during phase 2. So we hosted 5 roundtables and focus groups where we invited targeted populations to participate in small group sessions to share about their lived experience. During this, we also met with lenders and real estate agents to just better understand some of the barriers that their clients have been facing in the market. We also created an online feedback form to engage residents on what the role of local government should be in providing homeownership support. So we learned a great deal of feedback from that online forum. To supplement that online feedback form, we also held pop-up events throughout the county while the online feedback form was available. And it was really just to encourage participation in areas of the county where we traditionally see less engagement. So we held events at farmers markets along Columbia Pike, participated in the Green Valley Car Show, the Columbia Pike Music Festival. We participated in some food distribution events at CAF properties. We visited some community centers. So we tried to kind of go out into the community at times where there was high foot traffic and talk to people about what they see as the role of local government in providing homeownership support. We then used all this data and feedback that we received and met with the Homeownership Subcommittee to start workshopping for a work session to develop a vision statement and goals. And then held a large community workshop and invited the broader community to participate to further refine those vision and goals and help to brainstorm specific objectives, ideas, or actions to support those goals. So I did want to quickly remind everyone what the vision statement that we came up with was, because that was such a major focus during phase 2. So the community informed vision statement is to that Arlington's homeownership programs serve as a catalyst to preserve and expand affordable homeownership opportunities. And so we felt that this vision reflected the sort of variety of community conversations that we had, indicating that residents agree that the county's programs should serve as an impetus for opportunity, and that affordability for low and moderate income buyers and owners should be a central focus. And then expanding on that vision, we developed these 4 program goals to specify intentions for how to achieve those long-term aspirations. So the goals are to reduce racial homeownership gaps, support existing homeowners in maintaining housing in the community, increase the production of homeownership housing supply, and create pathways to homeownership for renters. So those are the 4 goals that we were kind of working with as we started developing the recommendations. So getting into that, but before diving into the specifics, I did want to just kind of give a summary slide that outlines the various recommendations for our existing programs, but also the new programs. And so And just also wanted to mention that, our goal is really to offer a more robust set of services for both home buyers, but also existing homeowners. And we really believe that these recommendations are going to lead to more equitable outcomes for underrepresented groups. We think it's going to create more opportunities for current homeowners who currently have limited resources available to them. We think it's going to help address barriers for prospective buyers that for which we can provide within our local government capacity. And that it will also, these recommendations should also tackle our homeownership supply challenges. I also wanted to just kind of give a bit of an overview of the proposed programs and our existing programs and where everything lands on the county's continuum of housing support. And so you'll kind of see where some of these new programs will fit in as far as the levels of income that the targeted populations that those programs will be targeting. So with that, we're going to start talking through the staff recommendations in more detail. The upcoming slides are going to outline challenges, the staff recommendations, and then their alignment with our homeownership goals. Like I said before, we're going to pause after each the overview for each recommendation for discussion. But we thought it might be helpful to, as we walk through the recommendations, to offer some questions for the subcommittee members to consider while you're thinking about the feedback to provide. So do you have specific questions about the recommendations? So how they are going to work, the timing, who the county intends to target for the programs? Do you have questions about how the recommendations apply to our vision or goals? Do you agree with the recommendations? And then, of course, are there other ideas to consider that could achieve a similar program goal? So with that, I'm going to now turn it back to Akiria, who's going to talk through our first recommendation, which is for the MyPAP program.
Yeah, so thanks, Caitlin. I do want to point out that the following recommendations and the core elements associated with those recommendations are listed in no particular order. So based on the aforementioned analysis and the community engagement, staff is recommending changes to the county's MyPAP program. Why are these changes necessary? So we see that MyPAP borrowers have to meet a very precise financial set of parameters because they must first fulfill the first trust lender criteria. MyPAP, again, is a second trust loan. So they must first fulfill that first trust lender criteria for income and credit. But at the same time, they cannot exceed MyPAP income and purchase price limits. So essentially, we are threading a needle. Moreover, the inventory of affordable units creates an additional layer of complexity. Secondly, although persons of color have lower mortgage approval rates and are charged higher interest rates, as we've seen, this has not been at the forefront of our program design, racial equity. So to address these disparities, to the degree possible, program design must really prioritize these households, must prioritize equitable access by implementing targeted initiatives. So although we've made strides in our outreach efforts to industry professionals and prospective buyers, on an ongoing basis, we want to broaden the community's familiarity with the program. And lastly, there are a few program parameters that are duplicative of first trust lender requirements. We can address this by streamlining the program criteria to responsibly eliminate those redundancies. So there are 4 core elements associated with the MyPAP recommendations. First, to increase the maximum purchase price. Then to target assistance with intentionality, guided by data, using an equity lens to identify and support historically marginalized buyers, and then to provide a modest level of support to prospective buyers that have incomes above the current income limits. And then lastly, to strengthen our partnerships with real estate professionals. So as a footnote, the average MyPap purchase price as of now, it's about $330,000. The recommendation is to increase the purchase price limit because we are also proposing a tier of assistance for higher income earners. So specific to actual assistance, this recommendation splits the MyPap program into 3 tiers. This example illustrates how we might consider structuring that assistance. The first tier would focus on priority communities at or below 80% of AMI. This would be a forgivable loan under certain conditions. The second tier would focus assistance to households below 80% of AMI and mirrors the existing MyPap structure, meaning that there is a proportionate share of appreciation, it must be repaid, it's a 30-year loan. So it would mirror the existing program. Then the third tier would support households between 81 and 100% of the area median income, creating a deferred loan, but at a much lower assistance amount, with max assistance being about $25,000 per applicant. So we think that targeting outreach to prospective buyers from priority communities will really allow the county to intentionally support households that have historically faced significant barriers to homeownership. Next slide. 26. The MyPap recommendations align with the goals 1 and 4 that Caitlin previously outlined, and that is to reduce racial homeownership gaps and to create pathways to homeownership for renters. And this is just a summary of how Arlington's down payment assistance program stacks up to other programs within the region. And I will note that the county's program provides one of the largest loan amounts in the country relative to the number of requirements. One notable exception is San Francisco, where households can get up to $500,000 for a first trust loan. But regionally, programs vary, primarily by funding amounts, loan interest rates, and residency requirements. The county's program does not have a residency requirement and allows for higher debt to income ratio criteria than neighboring jurisdictions. The proposed MyPap changes would suggest a cap of $100,000 for households earning up to 80% of AMI, with forgivable assistance to priority communities and deferred loans to other buyers. Additionally, the proposed changes offer modest yet impactful support to buyers between 81 and 100% of AMI. So with that said, do we want to stop for questions?
Yeah, I think we can open it up to questions, feedback, comments, and the floor is now open to committee members. Brian, go ahead.
Hi, thank you. I just had a quick question about the tools that the county was considering implementing in order to address the racial equity gap there. You mentioned in more vague terms what the issue was, but I want to get a little more detail on how the county intends to do that precisely with the MyPap program.
Yeah, I can start with that one. So the recommendation is that we target outreach to communities that have historically faced inequities. So, of course, households of color, first generation home buyers, households that have been historically marginalized. And so ultimately, our goal would be to ensure that we have really strong marketed, targeted outreach for those communities in order to be able to reach those communities and to provide them with the information that they need in order to move forward with possibly purchasing. One of the things that we have in another recommendation in the future is a home buyer cohort. And we think that that home buyer cohort, coupled with these resources, could really assist households by bolstering the purchase power for households that have historically faced racial inequities in home ownership. So we do know that further considerations are going to require legal review in terms of our exact approach, but we are in consultation with the county attorney's office on these recommendations and how we will be able to implement those changes in a sound way, but to be able to reach households with more specificity and more intentionality.
I'd also like to just add one other thing in that as a local government, we have to be really careful about how we target assistance to communities. We can't necessarily target funding to protected classes if it's going to create a disparate impact to other groups. So we're to sort of address this first tier of MyPAP where we want to target assistance to priority communities. We're looking at some things that other local governments across the country are doing, such as, targeting funds to first generation households. We know that there are communities that are doing that, targeting funds to households that have ties to historically redlined neighborhoods. So we know that there are other local governments that are doing that. So those are the kind of things that we're looking at to be able to fulfill the goals of this first tier of funding and to hopefully, meet some of those goals to reduce the racial homeownership gaps.
And I also wanted to point out, Brian, that we see across the country where programs are able to be more explicit, but typically those programs are operated through nonprofit entities as opposed to government entities. And so where we can leverage and where we can support the work of other entities to support that work, I think that is something that we are certainly open to doing as well.
All right, thank you so much.
All right, Nicole, I think your hand is up next.
I wanted to just voice my support for increasing the match purchase price to $650K. I think that's a great move. I also like the expansion of the program, both to up to 100% EMI and the expansion of the program and its benefits to those below 80%. A couple of questions specifically on that priority community that's identified and what that set aside looks like. So for the forgivable nature of it, is that, could someone purchase their home and then sell it immediately with no appreciate? Like most of these are going to be condos. They don't appreciate 100K that quickly. What is there any kind of restriction on just like flipping a house or a condo like this and just getting 100K basically?
So currently the county does not have restriction on when a unit can be sold when someone purchases with MyPAP. Typically, we see households at this income range purchasing for primary residency, and we have not had instances where buyers have purchased the home and sold within even a 5-year period of time. It's uncommon. But it is something that we may want to think a little further about, considering the possibility of a forgivable nature of the loan.
Maybe I don't like residency requirements, but I'm just thinking of people coming to basically just get that benefit and then leaving. But I wouldn't support putting a residency requirement because, like you said, most people are not doing that with these types of programs. But that was a question. So, and then the last part that I had a question about was there's notes in the one pager that you sent that there was a set aside for the priority communities. would that be a portion of the funds? And then how would you potentially break down the committed funds to MyPAP between set aside funds, the rest of funds, and then education?
So yeah, I think a lot of that is really
Hey,
going to come.
I'm
You
curious.
want to start that with Vic?
Yeah,
Go ahead,
and
Richard.
I'm going to answer that, and then I'm going to uh, uh, um, segue to the upcoming questions. So the answer to that question is we're going to figure that out, right?
Okay,
That
we'll
you know,
provide some feedback then. Thank you.
yeah, and certainly you can say, and this is what I want to say to everyone. You know, you can certainly ask a question because you just want to know. But if you have an opinion, just state it, right? And not to say that, Nicole, you have an opinion about that, but if you say this is great, but I think it should be this, just say that, and we'll note that, and we'll just try to respond to that. And then for everyone else who has questions or things, think about those questions as things to be answered. Maybe not today. So if there's going to take, you know, and I'm proud of my colleagues to, you know, to endeavor to, they're endeavoring to give full responses, but I want to make sure that we get to the end today. So maybe the question that you're asking is a question to be answered, and we're taking notes, and we'll have a comment response and response matrix so we can sort of edify everyone over time. So if you have a question that's going to take a long answer, understand that maybe we can just say, yes, we'll consider that and give you a response so that we can be sure to make it through today. All right. Because we want to make sure we get through this. So, uh, Caitlin, or maybe I'll just call on Mike next.
Great, thanks. And we can follow up as you study that issue about the quick flips that Nicole mentioned. I know how some jurisdictions deal with that. We can talk about that offline after. There's some pretty simple tools to deal with that. But the thing that I want to touch on is the increase to 80 or to 100% AMI. I'm not necessarily opposed to that, but we are doing part of the issue or the rationale for increasing that is because there's so few borrowers that meet that small box of like under 80% AMI with good credit, finding a house that they can afford that's within the income guidelines. A bunch of the other recommendations are meant to increase that universe of potential MyPAP borrowers. So increasing the purchase price limit, eliminating redundant requirements. So we don't know yet whether there's going to be a situation where households at or below 80% AMI are oversubscribed or not, based on funding availability. And if there's a big new pot of funding, then that's one thing. But if we're still talking about pretty limited resources, we have to consider about how we tier that. So the one thing that I was thinking about, and like I said, I'm not arguing against increasing to 100% AMI, but I want to make sure that we're not having a disparate impact there. And so that if 100% AMI, by increasing the, I wonder if we could consider as we investigate this further, that if we also if we're hitting higher income purchasers, that we are trying to accomplish other goals as well along with that. And could be another area where we put that priority communities frame. So you see in a scenario where down payment assistance is especially crucial for people who have been historically discriminated against via redlining. They haven't had the equity appreciation in their homes. They don't have that intergenerational family support for homeownership because of that discrimination. So that is a very compelling reason why someone that's at a higher AMI level than is typically eligible should benefit from something like down payment assistance that's meant to hit that specific issue related to past discrimination. So as we're increasing to 100% AMI, we might want to consider that that's an especially pertinent area to focus on priority communities.
That's helpful. Thank you, Mike. Joshua?
Yeah, just wanted to point of clarification. I think on the next chart it noted what the maximum amount of support was 100,000, and currently I think it's at 25%, which is like 112,000. So just clarify that this is actually reducing the maximum level of award for folks who would have qualified for that. And if that's the case, just is that getting to what we're really trying to do? And then I believe in the written report I saw, it had mentioned that, obviously more funding was needed for the program, and I didn't see that in the slide. Is there right now any plan for further allocated funds to expand the program, or is that kind of a later discussion with the budget?
Yeah, any sort of funding questions are sort of outside this. We want to confine this conversation to the recommendations themselves. Are they good? Do we have different ideas? How they actually get funded is certainly, a budget consideration for another time.
And to answer your first question, Joshua, yes, this proposal would cap that assistance at $100,000. The average MyPAP loan is about $78,000 at this point. So it would cap that in order to kind of make space for the tiered approach. Joshua?
Yeah.
Oh, the other
different Josh.
Joshua.
Other Josh.
The other one, I think. Good morning, folks.
Morning.
I was kind of picking up on basically the same thing that the last two commenters mentioned, which it seems like it could be a positive, I think, to like Michael said, expand the universe of folks that you're trying to support by adding the higher tier. I know from my own efforts at AHC, sort of as a developer looking at like, could we actually build new homeownership housing in Arlington County? Obviously, it would be like condos to get a little bit of scale, but 100,000 per unit. Whenever I see again the like 25,000 reduction on the 80 and below, I think it would pencil almost, it'd be really, really tough without extra support to be able to actually do a new construction type build to serve those household levels and the mortgages that they'd be able to afford. So I would maybe just, there might be other tools in the toolbox, and this is only the first of two presentations, but I would think about, is getting folks into homeownership opportunities in existing older housing stock the best sort of bang for the buck, and that's like the priority that the county has? And or does the county have a priority for any new development of sort of purpose-built moderate income homeownership opportunities? Because 100,000 won't be enough, I think, to get where construction prices are. And maybe that's not the right yeah, maybe that the cost benefit isn't there and you all have already weighed that, but if not, I would consider that.
Okay.
Well,
I'm
Josh,
also thinking like, especially if and when Missing Middle is able to take off in Arlington County, hopefully there will be someday a steady stream of 2, 3s, 4s, 5 plexes that start getting built. And any of that housing supply, unless you're able to capture it with I forget what the other program was called.
Maybe Spark?
No, it's where you have to contribute the affordable unit to build
Oh,
other units.
affordable dwelling units.
Yes, exactly. Sorry, the ADU program. Maybe you capture some through the ADU program, but I would just say it would probably be very limited, any new housing supply that comes online, with this subsidy alone being able to reach the households that you're looking for.
Yeah.
Josh,
So
stay tuned
yeah.
for our next subcommittee meeting, because we have a recommendation, I think, that responds to this concern.
Yeah, I'm excited
Yeah.
for that too.
Thanks for that,
think I
Richard.
saw it later in the recommendation pile as well. And just a general kudos for applying for the HUD funds. I think that'll be great. Thanks for the time for all this.
Thank you. So do we have any additional questions or considerations for MyPAP? If not, we will move forward to the next slide. So we are also recommending modifications to our affordable dwelling unit program, which is the county's main program for producing homeownership housing. We wanted to take a closer look at this program because the county currently secures few ADUs annually through the special exception process. And that is mainly due to development trends favoring mid and high-rise apartments over the last decade. The county typically adds 1 to 4 units per year. In FY22, there were 59 affordable dwelling units in the county's portfolio, and some of these units are aging. So we know that low and moderate income homeowners sometimes defer costly maintenance and repairs. So there is a concern that the current physical condition of these affordable dwelling units or ADUs may not be what we had hoped for them to be, and we currently have no mechanism in place for assessing the condition. So over the years, there have been very few ADU resale opportunities, and there are limits to resale prices because of affordability restrictions. Those affordability restrictions are in place and into perpetuity. Most of our neighboring jurisdictions have expiring resale restrictions. However, the county's resale restrictions are into perpetuity. And so we know that that's something that we want to take a look at. Our overall goal is to examine the physical condition of the existing ADUs to better understand the repair and maintenance needs. And we also want to take a closer look at the resale restrictions of these units and determine whether revising those restrictions would further ease barriers to wealth building and also better incentivize owners to keep up with the maintenance of their homes. So as part of the creation of the home improvement loan program, which we'll discuss in detail a bit later, our recommendation is to carve out a set aside of funding to address ADU repair and maintenance needs, which will assist in meeting our goal number 2 to support owners in maintaining housing, but also help to protect the supply of affordable dwelling units. So with that said, do we have any specific questions or considerations for ADUs? Michael.
Yeah, so the consideration, I think we should take a look at the resale formula, especially because of the home maintenance issue. I don't know the resale formula off the top of my head, but a lot of resale jurisdictions get to that by adding capital expenses into the resale formula. So I mean, there you can define it differently, and it can get complicated quick. But there is a simpler way, so that if you invest in replacing the roof, if it's sort of a townhome style property, or do major capital improvements, that gets put into the resale formula, so you're able to recapture that value of your investment. So that's one way to deal with that issue, in addition to the other ideas that you have there. I'm very hesitant to reduce the resale restrictions more generally, in terms of like the property. You don't have to sell to an income eligible homeowner at an affordable purchase price after X number of years, because while that we're getting to that trade-off of amount of support that we're providing to an individual family versus the number of people we're able to serve. So if we're talking about one of the main issues being affordable inventory, this would have the effect of having a marginal decrease in the affordable inventory, because depending on the number of years that homeowner lives there. So if we set the standard at like after 10 years, there's no resale restrictions, then that would encourage people to move out, and then that home sold at market value, and then more than likely, given the market trends in Arlington, it would no longer be affordable. So I would, the 30-year example that was on the chart for Montgomery County, I mean, if someone lives there for 30 years, that's more likely to be more in the naturally occurring inventory, affordable inventory, more naturally affordable because it's an older property. So, as long as the resale restrictions don't burn off unless an individual homeowner has lived there for 30 years, that's, kind of has the same effect because very few people actually live in the same home for 30 years when you look at the statistics. So, I think we should just be careful about that and understand the trade-off that would be working at cross purposes with some of our other goals if we move too far in that direction.
Great points. I see. So Joshua, you made a point in saying that reducing the resale restrictions is sorely needed. If people cannot build wealth through the program, they may as well be in affordable rental units. And that's a good point as well. I will say that the affordable dwelling unit portfolio, the way that the units increase in value is in alignment with the HUD area median income increases. So typically we see about a 3.5–4% increase on an annual basis. And that is that's in alignment for units that are in that price range that are market rate units. And so these units are certainly increasing in value year over year. There have been some years where a couple years ago where the HUD AMI increased by 10% and the value of those units increased by 10%, whereas the value of similar units that were market rate did not increase by anywhere near that 10% range. So there are some gives and takes associated with that criteria and with the formula.
Nicole, did you have a question?
More of a comment, and just to be brief, I would say to note that we are trying to increase the number of ADUs per year by 5. And something that we had talked about earlier was how to increase the number of ADUs that are produced. And I know that supply is going to be talked about later on briefly, but it wasn't truly addressed in ADU format. So I just want to insert it here that as we encourage the development of more for sale units, as we saw the 91% of apartment units being produced later on when we talk to developers about producing more for sale in condo form, to encourage the ADU production there as well.
So our goal isn't so much that we increase the affordable dwelling unit by 5 every single year. We don't have that as a goal, but we do want to in ways that we can incentivize the development of condos so that we can obtain these affordable dwelling units through the special exception process. But yeah, it's certainly something that we see that we are, not on pace with having enough of these units to sustain the demand for them. So great point. Thank you, Nicole.
Is there any other feedback on affordable dwelling units? Right, not hearing anything. I'm going to move us on to our next recommendation, which is and I'm going to take this one. Thank you so much, Akiria, for driving through the first two. So our next recommendation is related to the availability of programs and resources for condo owners and condo boards. So we talked about this a lot today. Condos are the most affordable entry-level housing in Arlington. But there are issues specific to owning a condo that does present challenges. So this could be rising condo fees and the impact of that on affordability, the age of Arlington's condo stock, deferred maintenance, and the risk of special assessments that is looming for some aging properties. So all these challenges disproportionately impact low and moderate income households who have limited resources to address these issues as they arise. So through our outreach and engagement with condo owners during the study, One of the things that we consistently heard was that, there are governance challenges, and that deferred maintenance was a challenge for both condo owners and for condo associations, and that our existing condo education series, which we offer through a partnership with the City of Alexandria, is not fully meeting the education and technical assistance needs of condo owners and condo boards. So to expand this support, we are recommending that we first expand our educational offerings and our technical assistance opportunities beyond our existing condo education series. This would involve creating an Arlington specific program. So we would have full control over the design of the curriculum, and we'd be able to create a more personalized approach that would respond to immediate challenges facing condo communities. But we're also hoping to expand our offerings even further to provide more one-on-one technical assistance to condo boards on governance challenges and issues that can't be properly addressed through an education program. And then to address financial and maintenance challenges of condo owners, we're also proposing to carve out a set aside similar to ADU program within the home improvement loan program to both support low and moderate income condo owners that need to make improvements to their units, but also to support condo owners who are impacted by special assessments. And I just wanted to reiterate that the county currently does not have a mechanism for supporting condo owners in this capacity. So we're really hoping that these improvements together will respond to goal 2, which will help condo owners in maintaining their housing. So does anyone have any questions on this recommendation?
Great, we nailed it.
Well, if anything comes up, if anything, if anyone has any questions further down the line, we can address it then. But without hearing anything and not seeing any hands, I think it's safe to say we can move on. So the next recommendation is really tied to fine-tuning our education and technical assistance offerings. So you'll kind of notice that a lot of the recommendations in here are kind of covered in different areas, but we did think it was important to have, one spot to kind of explain all the various sort of educational off program expansions that we're recommending. So, we currently offer home buyer education, and it's very useful for buyers, but it doesn't necessarily have that personalized one-on-one approach that we heard from prospective buyers is needed for especially folks who are kind of first starting out in their home buying process. And we also heard a lot that the opportunities for post-purchase education are limited. In fact, we don't really offer anything except for the condo education series. And really that was insufficient for buyers who might just need a little bit more information about how to maintain their ownership after, becoming a homeowner. So the recommendations for this program expansion are related to both home buyer education and outreach and homeowner education. And so, like I said, many of these recommendations overlap with what we're recommending in other programs. So I'm not going to go into too much detail. But to summarize, with regards to buyers, we want to first reach the right people. So we want to be focusing on targeted outreach to make sure that the communities that most need it can access our programs. So this could include minority and underserved communities, buyers with limited financial literacy, young buyers, and non-native English speakers. We also want to support new home buyers with a home ownership cohort program, and we're going to talk about that more when we talk about new programs at the next meeting. But with regards to existing owner programs, we're again recommending to provide post-purchase education to really help new homeowners manage their new responsibilities effectively. And again, we really did hear this pretty consistently from community members that there is a gap here. And then, of course, our proposal also includes help for condo owners and condo boards, which we talked a lot about in the last recommendation. And this will just really allocate additional resources and technical assistance to those who are households who are living in condos currently. So our education and technical assistance recommendations align with our goals to reduce racial ownership gaps, supporting existing homeowners, as well as creating a pathway to homeownership for renters. So does anyone have any questions about these recommendations? Karen.
Hi there. Yes, I do think post-purchase education is a great service to offer. The fact of the matter is people it's been in my experience that people actually do not come back after they have purchased their home, even though we've always offered that service. Once people are in their home, they're just focusing on getting by day to day. And they really actually only typically reach out to us when they have a problem. So if there's a way to get a carrot to get them to come back before they have a problem, that would be my recommendation. Thanks.
Thanks, Karen.
Thank you, Karen.
All right. Any other feedback? Okay. All right.
Sorry,
In the
really
chat.
quick,
Oh, go ahead,
apologize.
Nicole. Yeah, go for it.
I think earlier in the presentation, there was some commentary about how it was really helpful to have that information available, but it didn't necessarily translate into purchasing or using of programs and things like that. And so I appreciate having the service, but I also want to be mindful that there are sometimes more effective ways of getting people into the programs, like just making the programs bigger. So in terms of just funding allocation, to my preference being on putting funding towards having the programs expanded first and foremost.
All right. Thank you so much for that feedback.
Yeah, and thank you, Michael. I see your comment, and that's certainly something that we can consider in some way, shape, or form.
So Mike's comment in the chat was that
Yes.
could the carrot for participation be tied to MyPAP loan forgiveness benchmarks? And yeah, that's a good idea to consider. All right. Any other feedback or ideas? All right, well, moving right along. And then I think we're going to talk about the last recommendation for our existing programs, and then it probably makes sense to quickly touch on some of the ideas that were mentioned for the parking lot. And I want to be mindful that, since we are having two meetings, it probably makes sense to talk about new ideas at both. So we will do that after we talk about this next recommendation. Okay, so the next recommendation is related to the real estate tax relief program. And this recommendation really does generally mirror the recommendations from the Affordable Housing Master Plan 2021 implementation framework, which is to reevaluate the program with an equity lens. So we did hear a lot from study participants, often citing the real estate tax relief program as an area that the county should consider revisiting. So these recommendations are really aimed at ensuring that, through this review that we are, that targeted populations have equal access to the benefit and that the program is reaching the households most in need. So the bulk of this work we know would need to be coordinated very carefully with staff from various county departments, including the Department of Human Services. So the eventual review of this program will really be aimed at focusing on changes that might improve the program's effectiveness. Again, we're recommending a review of the program with an equity lens. That review, unfortunately, was not included in the scope of the homeownership study. And so, in doing this review, we do feel like that it would align with goals 1 and 2 of the study in that it would have a racial equity focus and support existing homeowners in maintaining their housing in the community. So with that, I will open it up to feedback and comments on real estate tax relief. Alice, go for it.
Good morning.
Morning.
My favorite topic with regard to this program is that I feel we need to reassess the deferred versus I don't like to use the word forgive, but if you do not have to give it back at all or at the end of your tenure in that home, some sort of formula exists where, especially when there's a huge increase in the value of the home, the person does not, or the estate does not need to repay any of that deferred tax back to the county. I don't think that's right. We help people who need help when they're in their home, but the kind of equity that's being built up in many homes in this community certainly would, you know, mean that some chunk of that, capital gains per se could come back to the county and be channeled into either helping other people pay their taxes or any of the things that we have discussed today. So to me, it's a big loss of potential revenue, and I'm looking forward to a review ASAP. Thank you.
Thanks, Alice. Any other comments on real estate tax relief? Karen, go for it.
My only comment is I have helped several elderly people apply for real estate tax relief. And every single person that I have helped, because I've seen all their financials, has really needed this service. And also, many of these seniors do not have any equity in their properties because many of these seniors have already taken out like reverse mortgages. So they're basically living on a shoestring budget anyways. So I think when this program is reviewed, that we look at the type of dwellings that these folks that are getting the tax relief live in and what the appreciation has been. Because my experience has not been that this is like something that the heirs are going to get a gazillion amounts of money from. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Karen, for that feedback. Any other comments? All right, well, not hearing anything. Of course, if any other feedback or comments come up, with it in the next, week or 2 weeks, and you're kind of thinking about this conversation and you have other ideas or questions, feel free to reach out to any member of the staff team, myself, Akiria, Richard, Elise, or Russell, and we will certainly, take that feedback to heart. But with that, I think it probably makes sense to pivot to some of the additional ideas that I know there's been a flurry of activity in the chat. Unfortunately, I haven't had a chance to really look at that yet, but I know that Elise has been taking notes. So Elise, if you wanted to maybe share your screen and we can kind of talk through some of those ideas really quickly with the last 10 minutes of the meeting.
Well, actually, I'll jump in because I think
Okay.
maybe I did a great job of discouraging outside conversation. So I think there's just a couple of ideas, and I'll just jump in and one thing I said. Oh, well, that's all right. We've got a parking lot. So I guess the first one here regarding the MyPap obligation to prevent a quick flip scenario, you can have gradual burn off. Yes. One of the things that when we, we're talking now, what's the big idea? What's the recommendation? There's going to be a lot of minutia that comes with program design. But all of this input is like going to feed that. So I'm not sure that we're going to in all cases solve the equation, as part of this discussion, but we certainly want to get everyone's ideas about, what, and when we get to implementation, what are some of the benchmarks we want to try and hit. So some of the issues related to um, um, wealth accumulation versus extended affordability, we're gonna have to sort through that. But your ideas about what we should do in that vein is something that we certainly want to hear about, and that'll sort of get worked out in the wash after we've settled on what the recommendations are, and we get into the actual implementation. Um, on the supply side, a lot of folks think about our affordable dwelling unit program. Again, that is fed through our special exception site plan process. And that is uh, guided by our affordable housing ordinance, which is linked to state code. And so we've had a lot of conversation about the affordable housing ordinance and a desire to um, modify that to the community's advantage. It has not been the right time and place to delve into that conversation. What we know is that the ears that might listen to us in Richmond would not be receptive to that conversation. And so we're waiting for the time when it would be appropriate to entertain conversations here locally to redefine what our affordable housing ordinance should say, and get a full conversation with the community, including the development community, and figure out if we can make those changes, and then have those recommendations received in Richmond at the appropriate time. So that time is not now. And we'll see when the right time is. But that's an important conversation to have. But that's a little beyond the scope of this study. Last one, the carrot in terms of post purchase education. I think a lot of our programs are complementary, and we'll look for those connections and where we can dovetail things together. And so we are certainly thinking about carrots. So when we talk next time about a homeownership cohort, what carrots can those participants receive, sort of to encourage them to be with us through that process. And so some of these things will logically dovetail together. Maybe we can open it up to the floor if anyone has any other ideas or things that they would like to put out for discussion. Alice.
Good morning again. I have not thought this through at all, but I wondered very generally if, some of the older condo buildings that we have in the county where these kinds of opportunities do exist for new home buyers to use MyPAP and get in. As we know, those buildings are old, aging. That's the capital, improvements problem. I wondered if there'd ever be some sort of a loan from the county, the feds, I don't know, that might help the entire condo, put in a new HVAC system or some like big stuff they need to do in exchange for providing some sort of affordability in that building, like create some more opportunity in a building as part of an agreement. Again, haven't thought it through at all, but just a thought.
Okay. Nicole.
I really like Alice's suggestion, and I'd also add a couple of ideas. I don't know if this is for new ideas or if this is just to add on to what is already out there, but generally I would say if you're looking at the funding pie, to put more funding towards things that are putting people into home ownership units and have that be the very specific priority. There are things recommended that are kind of like nice to haves that are supportive of those programs, but making sure that the vast majority of any kind of new funding that's coming in is going towards the programmatic implementation of what's being recommended. Thanks.
Okay, Don.
First, sorry, my camera is on the fritz today. So every loan program has transactional costs for both the applicant and the lender. So I would urge you to think through what's the minimum amount that makes sense for home improvement loans. I don't know if it's 25,000 or 10,000 or 2,500, but there's some threshold. And as you develop the HUD grant application, I'm glad to hear you're going for it. I urge you to include strategies to improve the existing home repair program. To help those low income and very low income homeowners who can't afford to repay a loan. And then to help those whose repair needs are too low to justify the transactional cost of a loan.
Thank you, Don. That's very helpful.
Any other?
Alice, are you back? Or is that your hands just still up?
Oops, sorry.
All right. So we have just a couple of minutes left. The floor is open. Anybody, just got a burning thing they want to say?
I have a question.
Sure.
I'm
And
thinking
hold
about.
just hold for just 1 second. Caitlin, can you put up the
Yes,
second
I
and
was just
third
about
slide
to
with the
do that.
schedule? Yeah.
Yes,
So
I was just
go
about
ahead,
to do that.
Alice.
Sure. I was just thinking about, our accessory dwellings and what it might take to modify that program yet again, subdividing lots or whatever to let those other buildings actually be home ownership instead of only rental. So I don't know what that would take, but we have, I think, upwards of 200 ADs in the county now. It's a thought.
Thank you,
I also
Alice.
was, sorry.
No, go ahead, Nicole.
Oh, I have a few. I'll email you guys. But another one that I wondered about is like at the beginning of this whole process, how are we helping people prepare themselves to be a homeowner? So like I know APA and maybe some other groups have started like matching savings programs, and people are putting money in there. They're creating that down payment, pot of money. Is there something we could do to help folks on the front end even get ready with what they need for their rainy day fund once they own, or their down payment or whatever, like, because we're probably helping people who, have already gotten to some level and can start to do that. Is there a way to bring some other folks up into that pool of potential buyers?
Yeah, that's a great
That's
point,
a-
Alice. And
Mhm.
that is something that we will discuss in the next meeting when we talk about the home ownership cohort. But we certainly see a need for that level of support and helping households to just get ready to prepare themselves financially, mentally for owning a home in the county. So yes, that's a very helpful recommendation. Christopher, I wanted to see if you could clarify your question for us a bit. I'm sorry, I'm not entirely clear on what you're asking.
Hi, good morning. Sure, just real quick. Alice mentioned, assistance of some kind for condos with their maintenance. And I thought that if, for example, for a structure that's not a condo, if a developer comes in, wants to buy the structure, its age, let's say it's like 30 years old, that they could get assistance from, state or local, funding assistance if a certain number of units, for example, would be affordable, within a certain, affordability priced, under market price, whether it's for rent or whether it's for resale. If there's going to be, if they're going to redo the property and then, so I don't know how that would work with a condo that already exists. And maybe that's where this gets tricky. So I was just wondering if there was a program that already existed, but maybe doesn't apply to these kinds of existing condo structures or co-ops that have private ownership and wouldn't have a a finance entity coming in or outside purchaser coming in.
Yeah, I think we can look a little further into that. I don't know of any financially structured program to assist developers, at least to a large degree, but I think we can certainly add that.
Yeah, I think the challenge is, if there's a 50-unit condo development, there's 50 individual owners, and then the condo association. So going back to Alice's point with older buildings, who's the agreement with to get the affordability on the back end? Because it's 50 individual owners and a condo association. So, I think we can talk about how, when we talk about new programs, how we can be of assistance to facilitate improvements or help when improvements are needed on existing condo buildings. That's one of our recommendations through the HIP program. So that'll be a future conversation. So I think we're here at the end of our time and want to allow everyone to get on with their day. So just a reminder about our upcoming schedule. Our next meeting is on October the 8th. We'll delve into recommendations for new programs. And certainly we're anxious to hear your thoughts about what's written in our recommendations, but certainly to hear from you on other things as well. On October 1st, we will have a public hearing on the HUD program housing grant, and we're working assiduously to get that published so people get a chance to review that before that time. The application date for the HUD program is October 15th. So there's a quick turnaround to get that in. And then we'll be going to the House Commission on October 10th. And then we'll have other engagement. We'll go to other commissions in the October, November timeframe and see where we are at the end of that in terms of all the input that we received. Ultimately, what we will do is provide a report to the county board through the manager. This is what we've learned through this process. These are the recommendations and modifications to what was previously published, et cetera. So we hope to do that. We'll see perhaps by the end of the year, but we'll see how we do in terms of getting through everyone's participation between now and then. So again, want to thank everyone for their time this morning, getting up bright and early on this beautiful day to share your thoughts with us. I think we got a lot of great input today. Looking forward to the next time when we hear from you again. We encourage you to stay involved, and certainly email us with some broader thoughts, some bigger ideas or other things, questions that you may have. We'll receive those and include those in our comment matrix as well. So thank you very much for your time today, and enjoy the rest of your week, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks all.
Oh, I see that Elise has
Thanks,
posted some
everyone.
information about our HUD program application. So they're submitting for the hearing. So please do participate in that. Thank you very much.